Well, mentality is super important. Yeah, I mean, Hikaru exerts tremendous psychological pressure on people because you know that even if you're winning, he's going to put up an insane resistance. Simo, thank you. So your hands are shaking and stuff, like that's real. And that is real, and Hikaru knows this, everybody knows this, and that's credit to him. He sets it up in such a way that, you know, it's even if you play well, that's only part of it. Okay. The games have become quite complex, so there are things I have to do without full explanation. I explain everything after the game, but be prepared for some complexity. We're playing Fan of 163. Let's go with the D4 again. I've been playing a little bit more D4, and let's play with the London system. I know a lot of people play the London, and they want me to play the London as well. So here, Knight C3 would transpose into the Jobava London. Let me play a Jobava London because that is my main opening. And I actually want to show you guys, give you some of the ropes of the Jobava London, which is kind of a cross between the Jobava and the London. Sorry, kind of a cross between the Verisov and the London. Usually in the classic London, you play C3. Okay, so E6 is already an inaccuracy. One of the good things, thank you, the Spectrum, about the move Knight C3, where can this knight go? Which square can this knight leap onto? Kind of like a fried liver that's transposed to the other side of the board. Yes. Now, the point here isn't to win the rook. Black goes knight a6, but now look at the situation. The knight on a6 is stuck, and it's very hard to get rid of the knight on b5 with a pawn. So now we're just going to develop our other side, and we're going to play this London style. We're going to safeguard the pawn. So let's go c3. Let's make sure this pawn on d4 is very securely protected. Well, I'll explain. So where should this bishop go, d3 or e2? What do you guys think? And actually, either square is fine. But what seems to be a little bit more active? Yeah, so d3 is a little bit more active. We just have to be careful. Yeah. So if we castle, we blunder a piece because he goes c4. He disattaches the knight from the bishop. So how should we support this knight in order to make sure that it's safely defended? And when I say that, that's a key word for supporting it with a pawn. Pawns are the best defenders of a piece. So we've already formulated that principle. And here's what we have to be ready for. We have to be ready to sacrifice a pawn on b5. And I'll explain that fully after the game. But he can pressure that knight with his queen. Let's drop our bishop. And we will not move the knight. We will let him take it. Okay, he takes it immediately. Okay, and he's... yeah, so this is an interesting moment. Now, this is kind of what I mean. We can simply give that pawn up on b5, and we're going to have a good amount of compensation. But because of the way that he's done this, we can also defend with the move bishop a4. That's a little bit awkward, though. But here's what I want to do. I want to give this pawn up. Yeah, rook takes a7 is very interesting, by the way. Let me think about how we want to do this for a second. This is interesting. We have several tempting moves here. So let's play b6. And the purpose of this move is to force his knight onto a8, which buys us more time. We sack the pawn. His knight now has to go back into the game. And in the meantime, we're going to complete our development. We're going to start putting pressure on his king. And perhaps combine that with pressure down the a file. That's going to be the ultimate goal here. So, yeah, rook takes a7 is super interesting. Okay. Yeah, this guy is playing extremely well as well. So let's centralize our knight, the toaster. Thank you for the prem. Let's centralize our knight. And I'll talk about various options after the game, various alternatives. Right? It's hard for me to talk about alternatives because of the time that it takes. He activates his knight. And now... he's played this really, really well. I'm not entirely satisfied with how white has played this. Yeah, so let's go for it. Let's go g4. We have limited time before he brings his pieces to the queen side. We need to use this time to start attacking. Knight d7 is another excellent move. So AP wing, thank you. Okay, Dame Morax, I don't want... okay, queen f3, let's bring the queen in. I want people to give themselves a chance. If you don't give yourself a chance to understand things, you're not going to understand, this is too high level. That's the point of the speedrun. I'm trying to explain everything in a way that will make it understandable for everybody. Okay, so what should we do here? How do we continue putting pressure on his position? Now, there's several ways of going about this. Notice that the A file is what he wants to eventually get his pieces on. So before we do anything, let's go rook a1 to make sure that the a file is at least under our control. If he goes b3, we can drop the bishop back to him. Then we're going to go e4 and break apart the center and try to create more chances. So let's go e4. And yeah, no, this guy is just extremely strong. Now we need to keep tightening the screws. What does that mean? How do we bring pieces into the attack? Yeah, I mean, we might lose this game. Manjaro Black, thank you for the prime. Let's go rook a7. Let's bring the rook into the game. And we have a lot of pressure in return for the pawn. I'm not entirely happy with the level of that pressure, but what we're trying to do here is play on both sides of the board. We're trying to put pressure on the queen side and put pressure on the king side, and the hope ultimately is that his position at some point starts to buckle. But it's my position that's starting to buckle, not his, because of the precision with which he's playing this. So let's play. How should we do this? What should we do? Well, if we play pawn takes, he's going to go b3. So this stuff is just not looking great. Let's actually go e5 to lock things up in the meantime. Well, I mean, so now let's take it. And now let's get the rook to b7, attack the bishop, get it out of there. And yeah, we're getting soundly... Yeah, I'll explain why I'm like in trouble here. But now we're going to bring the queen to b1. Ultimately, we're trying to get the queen to b5. And the point of that is that he has pieces now on the 7th rank, which we're trying to attack. Guys, again, tone down the accusations. I'm capable of losing a game. This guy just might be very strong. You know, I'm good with checking people after the game, but as I've explained many times, we want to tone down the baseless accusations, particularly since he blundered a bishop here. Particularly since he just blundered a bishop. But he follows this up very well. He's going to capture d4. So we have to bring our rook back to b7. We need to save our rook. And now what we need to do is we need to tone down his initiative here. How should we do that? Well, we can take on h7. But then our bishop is going to be stranded. Okay? So actually, white is still in trouble, believe it or not. We got to bring our rook away so that our queen is able to protect the bishop and not protect the rook at the same time. Okay, now we're going to go rook b8 and force the trade of rooks. If he takes on c2, what do we do? Do we take back on c2? Yeah, he's playing super set. Rook takes f8 first. No, yeah, queen takes c2. Now, what is the battle going to revolve around? He has two, yeah, I mean, he's got two of these passed pawns, which are super dangerous. We need to use our bishop and our queen to somehow limit the progression of these pawns. And we also got to create counterplay. So we're going to repeat moves here really quickly. And we're going to try to induce g6. If he goes g6, he weakens his position. And then we're going to use our pawns to try to shatter the defenses around his king. Okay, I should probably take the draw here, but let's push our pawns out for now. Yeah, this is probably a draw, realistically. But we're going to see what we can do in terms of playing for a win. Okay, let's repeat moves again. Let's try to bait him into going for the win. Now let's go bishop e3 to attack his queen. Let's see where he wants to put that queen. What I'm going to try to do here is establish a blockade. So, okay, that is... Oh my god, that's actually a really nice move. Wait, no, I think I can take. And now we need to bring our king in. I'll explain all of this after the game, guys. Do not worry. Please do not worry. I promise I will explain everything I'm doing. You just got to give me some slack here because I've got 30 seconds. Now, what am I going to do here? He's already made a mistake. He's going to lose his pawns. How am I going to reach his pawns here? What am I going to do to reach his pawns? What is the next move going to be? Yeah, bishop d4, winning his pawns. Winning his pawns. Boom. There's one pawn. Now, we just take the second pawn and the game is over. We're simply up a piece. And now what we have to do is simply bring our king up and induce Zugzwang and create a passed pawn. That's kind of the method that we've been talking about. That's it. we're just going to bring our king up and then create a pass pawn and promote this pass pawn using our extra bishop. As I always warn you guys, be very careful about pre-moving in these types of situations. So how should we go ahead? How should we go about actually promoting? Do we even need the bishop here? Do we need to use the bishop? No, G7 and then king F7, yeah. And then we promote. And now we can just go bishop F6 and force his king back and then deliver the checkmate. Yeah. Guys, not my first time getting into time pressure, trust me. So let's talk about the game. I want to make one thing very, very clear. And I'm gonna, as always, I'm going to be honest with you guys about what I feel, which I think people perhaps may appreciate in the end. Now, I am honored to do this because of the feedback that I get, which is so positive and it's incredible. But I want, and I'm no one to lecture people about mentality or how to approach this, but I have been in your shoes once. I was an 800 and I was a 1700. And I have listened to many a lecture by GMs where I was completely over my head. And I totally get it. But I want to encourage people to come in with, not with the attitude of, he's 2200, I'm not going to understand any moves, this is way too fast. Rather, I want people to say, okay, perhaps this is too fast in the moment, but I'm still going to be engaged, I'm still going to try to understand, and I'm going to ask questions and not be afraid of that, because that's the kind of community we're trying to set up here, where anybody can ask anything, and I will do my ultimate best to explain this to the level that you're at. And nobody should feel bad for being the rating that they are. That's the assumptions that I come in with the speedrun, even at this level. So this is where I'm going to explain everything, and I want people to at least give themselves a chance and give me a chance to help you understand stuff at your level. Thank you, Madigan, for the prime. Okay. So this was the London system. Now, knight c3 is the Jobava London. The classic London is c3, which creates a stronghold on d4. Oh, my batteries. I'll have to replace headphones. And we then get the bishop in between the triangle. So I won't delve too much into the theory of the London. The move knight c3 really made a resurgence like 5-6 years ago, thanks to the efforts of this Georgian grandmaster, Bahadur Jobava. He's sort of very, very flamboyant, creative player, and I actually picked this up at that time as well. I've been playing this as one of my full-time openings since then. Now, some people might look at this and say, well, wait a second, can't I just take on c5? Yes, you can. That is a very legitimate line. Black can pick this pawn back off. He can play queen a5, queen c5, or black can play e6, and or black can even play knight c6 and try to prepare e5. The battle revolves around whether white will be able to keep the pawn on c5. Black gets further control of the center. It's a very interesting line. Now, a lot of people here go knight c6, which is a horrible mistake. Why is this a big blunder? This is one of the appeals of playing the Jobava in Blitz. You will get a lot of people, even at a very high rating, playing this move. And the reason is, and it's very funny, knight b5. Black has no defense against knight c7. Short of moving the king, which is horrible. And if black goes e5 to intercept the bishop, thank you, Mr. Tumbeas, we take on e5, and now white is up one pawn, but there is a beautiful idea that picks up a second pawn. How should you see this? Well, this is a forkable square. I've talked many times about the importance of detecting forkable squares, squares on which a fork can be delivered. Well, what's stopping our knight from coming to c6? It's the queen. Can we distract the queen somehow? Well, we got to consider this move. And it's not the rook that we're going after. It's the queen. We're up 2 pawns. Black's king has lost its castling right. Black is basically lost in this position. So e6 is also interesting, by the way. Yes, queen takes d5 is something I want you guys to remember. But our opponent played e6. a6 here would be a good move, stopping knight b5. That's actually one of the main moves. Now knight b5, knight a6. So, as I explained, the knight on a6 is almost permanently out of the game. And that's what makes this a difficult position to play for black. The knight on b5, on the other hand, is occupying very nice, not really an outpost, but a good square. And it can be supported, as we did in the game, by a pawn, keeping the knight out of the game. So knight f3, bishop b7, just developing, going c3, buttressing this pawn on d4. That's kind of a London move. Now bishop d3, putting the bishop in between the triangle. So it's still like, it has the contours of a London, except there's this like knight on b5, which is an interesting flavor. So bishop d7. Why is a4 important? Because if we castle, he goes c4, attacking the bishop, attacking the knight. So we need to defend the knight with a pawn. c4, bishop c2, and he takes, which I actually kind of underestimated. Takes and knight c7. So a lot of people here suggested the move rook takes a7, which is a very interesting sacrifice. The idea is to get the rook to a forkable square. Now you go b6, attacking the rook, attacking the knight. Black can move the rook here, and we take the knight, let's say, with a pawn. But the issue is I feel like white doesn't have enough compensation. White's initiative is gonna fizzle out because you're not going to be able to retain this pawn on c7. For example, if you were to now castle, how would black go about winning this pawn? And think of it in terms of its defender. Like, the bishop is defending the pawn. Can we intercept this bishop's control of the pawn? Thank you, Siva Fekimana Chess. Yeah, bishop d6. Good job, guys. And then we win the pawn, and black is left with an extra exchange. So it's a tempting move, but I don't think it really works. So maybe I should have just bit the bullet and gone bishop a4. Now I know that the bishop is passive, but at least we keep the pawn protected, and so is the knight. The knight is also passive. I decided to play the move b6. The idea is not only to double his pawns and open the a-file, and I feel like I'm more poised to control the a-file than he is, but also we keep the knight out of the game, which gives us some time to orchestrate attacking chances on the other side of the board. This should make sense to everybody. But our opponent played this super well. b5 is a really good move. Two ideas. Preparing to break down our pawn chain and preparing to deploy his knight to b6. Why doesn't black take with the queen? Because that would lose the protection of the knight. We would win the knight. Okay. Castles, b5, knight e5, centralizing the knight. And here we played a move that I know confused a lot of people, g4. How do I know that it's okay to weaken the king side like this? And what is even the idea of g4? What exactly are we trying to accomplish? Well, from a logical perspective, what we're trying to accomplish is get this knight out of f6. What does that do? Well, imagine he makes a random move, and we chase the knight out of f6. When we chase a piece out of a particular square, the way we need to approach that is ask, well, what squares are now available to our pieces? So if we ask that question in that way, what do we find? h7 is weak. That's an important observation. But what specific square can we go to now with one of our pieces? And he has no longer any defenders. Yeah, boom. Well, g4 is true, but h5 is more effective because we attack both pawns. He's got to go g6. Now we can sack on g6. And he has no good way of defending h7. That's how quickly things can crumble here for black, because he's got no pieces in the defense. So that's actually the idea of g4. But obviously, pushing a pawn out in front of your own king is not something you should do lightly. And how do I know that he can't exploit this? Well, there's two things to bear in mind. Number one, it's not like he has that many pieces on the king side. If he had a rook on g6, if he had a queen on h4, it would be a different story, but he doesn't. Moreover, I have a lot of beef on the king side. And remember, these pieces can be attacking pieces, but they can also be defensive pieces. They make it hard for black to do anything in relation to our king. You know, that's like, okay, bad analogy, but nowadays, in the days of Zoom, you wear sweatpants, to meetings where that would be unthinkable just a year before. Or you don't wear pants at all. Or, you don't take a shower, you don't brush your teeth, and you hop on like a super important call with your CEO. And think of it that way. It's not inherently bad to weaken your king if nobody's going to see it. And black can't take advantage of it. So you shouldn't think of things globally. I'm weakening my king, I can't do that. Rather, you should ask, is it okay to weaken my king? Can black exploit this realistically in the future? Thank you, Ayamba. Hopefully that analogy wasn't too far out there, but it'll help people understand. Okay. Yeah, knight e4 is possible. And that actually is what black should prefer, but we can still go queen h5. We can still go queen h5. Or we can go h4 followed by f3, try to chase the knight out of there. Yes, knight e4 would be the best move, but I'm trying to illustrate a concept here, not necessarily analyze this position directly. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. He goes knight ft7. We get the queen into f3. Knight ft7, another really good move, trading the knight. And g5 is no longer possible. That blunders the pawn. So queen f3. Takes, knight d7. We got to move our bishop back. And now he plays b4. And now I played the move rook a1, which surprised a lot of people. Like, didn't I just say that we want to attack on the king side? Why am I all of a sudden switching gears and attacking the queen side? Well, again, you have to be very flexible, point A. And point B, it's actually very hard because of the way that he's defended this to make anything happen on the king side. I can't play g5, I can't play h4, and it's just too slow, and I can't get my queen to any of the squares where it will build a battery with the bishop. So in the absence of that, you might as well try to attack on the other side of the board. Remember that I played b6. Sorry, I need to grab different headphones. So let's get back to the game. So does that make sense? We go rook a1. Remember that I played b6, and I partially played this move in order to open up the a file because I thought that one day I might want to exploit that. Okay, and here we're exploiting that. We're getting the rook to a1, and this is a very advanced concept called attacking or playing on both fronts. When you're fighting a war, you want to open up a second front because our opponent has allocated some resources to the king side, so logically it should make sense that we're also trying to involve the queen side. Well, GM Zoot asks, well, why not prepare h4? Because that takes a lot of time. That takes just too much time. Like, you can do this, and by the time you do that, remember the 3-move rule. If an idea takes 3 moves or longer, it's usually unrealistic. Guess what? Black's just going to go after our c3 pawn. By the time you do play h4, your entire position is going to collapse. And it's not like when you play h4, black just resigns. It'll take you a lot more time to actually create threats, so it just takes way too much time. Okay, so yeah, taking on b4 is possible, but then we break up our own pawn chain. I just didn't want to do that. So rook a1. So he takes and goes b5, and now we go e4. We're trying to attack on both sides of the board. Yeah, so a lot of people asking about e4. e4 is fine. Maybe that would have been good, but he has knight f6, much like in the game. And in and of itself, e4 is actually not going to like win the game or anything. He defends everything here. If we go g5, he takes on e4. This leads to a mass trade, and he can slam his queen into d5. He's traded a bunch of pieces. He's up a pawn, and there's nothing left of white's attack. We cannot afford to give up our light squared bishop. That is the main vehicle for kingside attack. So I wanted to play e4 at a better time. This is a better time because he also has to worry about the rook getting into a7. And that's exactly what we did. He plays b4, and that was a really good move because he's ignoring phantom threats. There's actually no specific threats, and he continues the attack. I played e5 to open up my bishop, chases knight away. Knight d7 takes, and now rook b7, trying to get his bishop out of this active square. And queen d1 was a really good move, actually. Queen d1 was a really, really good move. If he played b3, oh, you mean here. If he played b3, he would have just gone bishop b1. And that's another good reason to play rook a1. If we had played bishop b1 with the rook on f1, we would not have been able to get it there. Okay. So queen d1 was a really good move. Okay. And this demonstrates my ability here to be flexible. Because the queen on f3 was once good, but it has no more utility on this square. Because it can't get into any of these squares. It can't get to h5 because we can't play g5. That would blunder a pawn. So we need to find a new job for the queen. We can't afford to let it just marinate on f3. And the job that I found for the queen is twofold. First of all, to set up the battery with the bishop. That's not too bad. That's worse than having the bishop behind the queen, but it's better than nothing. And the other thing is, we keep the rook on b7. And this rook kind of binds him to the 7th rank. Does that kind of make sense? So I'm switching gears here to the queen side. And I'm basically trying to get the queen maybe even to b5. And he panicked. He blunders the bishop. And what should he have done here? He should have probably prepared. How can he prepare knight b8? What are the possibilities for black to prepare knight b8? What kind of things could he have done here? And I already think that black made a mistake somewhere. This is getting very interesting. Yeah, rook e8 would have been possible. But I just discovered that against rook e8, on the subject of flexibility, what nasty little move does white have? What should you notice here? 2 pieces on the same diagonal. That should ring some alarm bells. And white can go bishop a4 and skewer it. And the rook has to go to d8. Now you go queen b5, and black might lose a piece anyway. So this is quite unpleasant. So I think that maybe black made a mistake by going... No, I just played this very well. I think I managed to create chances. Maybe rook e8 here. I don't know. I don't want to delve too deeply into that. But at some point I created chances. He responded very well. And the situation is still super complicated because he's got these 2 connected passers. My pieces are scattered all over the board, and my king is kind of weak. So first of all, we have to drop the rook back. Because if we do just about anything, he's going to take c2 and then take b7. So the queen is overloaded. We need to un-overload it. Now we go back to b8. Trading is good. We're up a piece. Takes, takes, takes. And in this position, white should be better, but it's very hard to contain these pawns. Yeah, I'll check the accuracy after I finish analyzing for sure. And basically, his mistake, let's fast forward to his mistake. His mistake was to go queen d5. And I want to make this very important point. Bishops are incredibly good at containing passed pawns. Thank you, X3M Coffee. Knights are horrible at containing passed pawns. Bishops are amazing at it. So it's very easy in your brain to underestimate. You think, oh, look at these pawns. These pawns are going to steamroll him. Guess what? The bishop is a really good blockader of passed pawns. And in combination with the king, because these pawns are not supported by black's king, they don't have a chance. What he should have done here is something like queen b5 or queen a5, and he should have tried to use his queen to supervise the progress of these pawns. That basically would have forced me, I think, to eventually go for this perpetual. Yeah, so usually the bishop is much better at containing passed pawns than knights. Ippo, Makunochi. And I'll show you guys why that's the case, and I'll show you guys an example of this after we finish analyzing. So basically, he goes c3, but basically we just put our bishop on d4 at the right moments. The king blockades the pawns from behind, the bishop in front, and the pawns just go down one by one. If he didn't go c3, we would have still blockaded the pawns of bishop d4, and then brought our king up, and then we can just ignore those pawns. We can circumvent them. If he had gone g6, then I would have gone h4, h5, trying to break up the pawn structure around his king, so we can actually go for an attack here. Thank you, Yumanfu with 5 gifted to the community. Holy smokes. Yeah, so g6 is a hook, and what I want you guys to understand is that even though we only have 2 pieces left, the nature of chess is such that even 2 pieces, a queen and a bishop, can definitely create very strong attacking chances against the king, particularly since he's still down a piece. So does that make sense? Does it make sense that when I do this, black's king side is really weakened? So what may happen is a check like this. Guess what? Checkmate, ladies and gentlemen. That's how quickly things can deteriorate. When the king is this weak, even a very limited amount of material can contribute to an immediate attack. There's even several books on endgame tactics. There's a very famous book called Von Pirlo's Endgame Tactics. Big, big book, thick. And it's a correspondence player who compiled, I would even go so far as to say thousands of instances of attacks, checkmates, and tactics in the endgame. There was an old Russian coach, Orest Taverkin IM, who said endgames are 99% tactics. That's what people don't always realize. Endgames are incredibly tactical, more so than it might appear if you just go from the number of pieces left on the board. Right. Well, if he forces a queen trade, then that's great for us because we're up a bishop, and we can blockade the pawns. Now, just very, very quickly, before we move on, yeah, queen takes e5 would defend, but again, I'm trying to illustrate the general theme here, not the specific position as much. Thank you, Aquila, for linking that. Now, the thing with knights and passed pawns, bishops can stop a passed pawn from a very long distance. So let's examine a concept here. So let's say we have this, right? We have a sample position. I know there's no black king. We don't need it. We have a bishop and a knight, and we have an a pawn that is passed. Thank you, T556. Which of the black pieces should we use to blockade to stop the progress of the pawn? The answer is the bishop. Why? Because the bishop can do it from e4. And the great thing is this bishop could be relaxing on a beach in Hawaii. It can be visiting the Museum of Modern Art while defending the pawn on e2, because the bishop is a long-range piece. And the bishop, most importantly, is unassailable. White's king can go back to the bishop. Ha-ha, joke's on you. And this is not a very efficient this is not a very efficient path that the king takes. So you can buy yourself a lot of time by guarding the pawn of the bishop. Now let's say we were to remove the bishop from the board. Knight's gonna capture the bishop. And let's say that we use the knight to guard the pawn. Well, you guys can all appreciate how bad the knight is, right? The knight is limited to this square. And once the king approaches, the knight has no choice but to go into the corner, and the king literally traps the knight. That's it. There have been many games that have been decided precisely in this way. You can even sacrifice, you can leave your opponent with a knight, sometimes even 2 knights. Hikaru once beat me like that in a very nice fashion. And the knight will be unable to contain the passed pawn for a long period of time. And obviously, if you were to move the pawn to like a3, the knight would fare a little bit better. You know, the knight would be able to contain the pawn, but the king could continue to chase it, and you would have a draw, because if white plays a4, the knight can give itself up for the pawn. So barely the knight can contain it at its own cost, but you guys get the point. Knights are very bad at stopping past pawns, comparatively speaking, particularly to bishops, and of course to rooks. Okay, now don't take this to heart. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule. There's specific positions where there are complicating factors. And I want to make that very, very clear. So, for example, we can set up the following position. And this will present to you guys a complicating factor. For example, here, right here, if the bishop tries to stop the passed pawn, what resource will white have? Who can tell me? You guys should be able to see the whole board. The resource is d5. And that's the mentality you should always have, right? You should be looking for specific factors that may influence the application of a particular theme. So here, for example, the knight might be better off stopping the passed pawn, and the bishop might be better employed as the defender of the knight, if that makes sense. The king can't attack it. The pieces should work together in this way. Thank you, SnappleFax, for the prime. But that's the concept I want to illustrate. Okay, now let's check the accuracy. And then we'll move on to the next game. Tag team, absolutely. So let's analyze. My accuracy was probably quite low, but let's see. Dr. Lodo, 21 months. Holy smokes, dang girl. Okay, it was, oh, that was 96% for us. Damn girl, 96% to 87.3. Okay, we'll take it. So it was 96% for us to 87.3. No, I mean, I'm trying. We're not just, I'm not fooling around with these moves. This is what I actually am thinking. Okay. That was better than I expected. But let's go back to the speedrun. Thank you so much, J. Moses. 10 gifted. Damn, girl. 100 bits on damn Mark Art. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. 87.3 is really solid. And tactics, the accuracy doesn't reveal everything. No, TD97, non-best moves on purpose is absolutely not what I'm doing. There are occasions when I do that to an extent, but I try to limit that. Let's go on. Any questions about the game, or may we proceed? Okay. In your game with black pawns on d3, c45. So d4, my friend. No, because, let's see. Well, d4, I can just take it and stop the pawn on my king. He just doesn't have time for it, because my king is close enough to the pawns, if that makes sense. Let's go.